Welcome to another honorable mention on the 2023 Locked On Senators NHL Draft Rankings. We're doing a top 50 on Locked On Senators, but these are players that could be available for the Ottawa Senators, or maybe they were just selected by your team in the draft. Today's profile is on Ottawa 67's forward, Luca Pinelli and Pilsy. It's energy when this kid's on the ice.
Yeah, anyone that spent any time watching the 67s, which I'm sure a lot of Sens fans have, being in the Ottawa area, know this kid has a motor. And the key to his game is that drive. Every shift, he's putting in the work, forechecking, back checking, and he's not necessarily the strongest skater, as Elite Prospects notes. And if you follow Elite Prospects work, you know they're very particular on how a skating stride should be. And they don't exactly love his skating stride, but that doesn't stop him from being someone that's able to, play with high intensity. And maybe he's not the fastest, but he has that energy that makes him efficient, shift in and shift out.
And fearless comes to mind as well. He's 5'9", but drives the middle of the ice as often as he can. He's not going to shy away from the dirty areas just because he's undersized. And he's 165 pounds right now. Left shot centerman who had in 67 games, 29 goals and 34 assists, good for 63 points and 60 penalty minutes with the 67s. In playoffs, though, he stepped up even further from under a point per game during the regular season to 18 points in 11 playoff games. Now, the rankings are a little bit all over the place, and The Athletic encapsulates that perfectly because their two reporters, draft analysts, are about as far away from each other as possible. Scott Wheeler has him at 51st, while Corey Pronman has him at 100. Chris Peters has him at 58, and Elite Prospects has him at 82. It's also worth noting that Elite Prospects had him ranked 41st coming into the season, which meant that they saw him as maybe a guy with top 9 upside, and they just couldn't nail down the projection this year, so they decided to put other guys ahead of Luca Pinelli. The average is 72.8, so he's looking at, in terms of the average of our rankings, like an early third-round pick. Pilsy, you think he hears his name called around that range?
I'm not so sure about early third round, Ross, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhere in the third round, or maybe even he slips down to the fourth round, depending on what teams are looking for here. But there's a lot to like about Luca Pinelli. I'm not trying to downplay his skill here, and it's interesting that EP switched on him so much there, Ross. It must be because of that skating stride. Like I mentioned, they don't love it. They say he kicks up a little bit too much and uses too much energy to get speed. So maybe with some off-season skating coach, he can work on that and be a little bit more efficient in his strides. But the thing is he has good hockey IQ as well. So if you have a good motor and you have good hockey IQ, you're going to be setting up teammates, and you're also able to put yourself in good spots so that you can score. And I mean, he had 29 goals, and you mentioned it already. His success in the playoffs proved that he's able to do that. So I think he's the type of guy that teams are going to look at and be like, this could be a really good, energetic bottom 6 player that could tap in offensively as well with some development. So I think any team would be happy to have Luca Pinelli in, mid third round or early fourth round.
I think that would be a good pick in that range. I'm a little nervous that if you're going to have a guy who only projects as a bottom 6 guy, I think you'd probably lean to the guy who's 6'3", 6'4" versus the guy who's 5'9". Not saying there's not room for everyone, but it also kind of feels like those more skilled players who can project safely as like a top 9, top 6 forward, you're more so going to look away from the size. Whereas if your job is to outmuscle your opponent every night, usually bigger, faster, stronger is kind of the answer to that. But with Luca Pinelli, what I like about him too is from reading and watching the minimal highlights that are available online is that he's making his teammates better. Like, I think he's a really good, you talked about the hockey IQ, and I think he shows that in distributing the puck. I think coming in off the rush, he does a really good job of finding the open guy and then driving the middle lane and kind of peeling a defenseman back, giving his teammates room to operate. He's not the kind of guy that's going to pass the puck and then start coasting. That motor is whether he has the puck, whether he's chasing the puck, or whether he's just distributed the puck to one of his teammates. So I'm a big fan of his. I think he could top out as like a guy you look back like, man, he was so dominant in junior. Like, he's coming back to the 67s next year. They should have a good team. He's going to put up 1,000,000 points. He outproduced guys like Vincent Rohrer, who was a draft pick of the Montreal Canadiens, and others on the 67s lineup. But I almost see him as a little bit like another one of his former line mates in Brady Stonehouse, where he's so dominant in junior because they're fearless out there. They're willing to go to the dirty areas and score goals. But we saw last year, Brady Stonehouse was passed over in the entire draft. And then he had still put up a huge year. And then he goes back 37 goals this year. So it's one of those where the height is working against these guys. And it's unfortunate because we've seen time and time again, guys kind of persevere despite being a little bit shorter. But I just see that I'm talking about his draft position more than his future. And that's why I see him like middle to late third round is probably a more accurate depiction of where we could see him go.
Well, Ross, some GMs and some scouts may have the opinion of, look, I'd rather have a little guy, or I shouldn't say little guy, smaller guy that doesn't need to be motivated, that is going to work hard every shift, and that's already a part of his game. And there's room to grow, right? He's still a teenager, so he has time and room to grow, rather than a big guy that lacks that motor, and you really gotta push him, and you really gotta work to get him going. So some people may look at that as an advantage. Like, he already has that energy and drive. We don't need to work on that. It's just, can he get stronger? Is he going to grow into his body a little bit more as time goes? So I think teams aren't going to shy away from Luca Pinelli just because he's a little bit on the smaller side.
If a team's drafting Luca Pinelli, you're looking at a patient project, right? You're looking at a guy who's a few years away from making the jump.
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's definitely going back to the OHL next season. I wouldn't even be that shocked if he does 2 more years in the OHL and then maybe some time in the AHL as well.
Okay. And the upside on a player like this?
The upside is he can be someone that can be a good bottom 6 forward that, like I mentioned, you don't need to motivate. He has good hockey IQ, and his brother, a draft pick that you loved from that draft, Francisco Pinelli, is already showing some good signs. So it's nice when you have hockey family, and you can tell that those two guys will be pushing each other in the offseason to get better.
Yeah, they certainly will. So Luca Pinelli comes in as an honorable mention on our Locked On Senators 2023 NHL draft rankings. For more draft rankings, you can head over to Locked On Senators on YouTube and download us wherever you get your podcasts. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.